ado, Ben Ray Luján.
Hey. All right. Oh, hey, everyone. Good to be with you. You can see why Brian is such an incredible leader and so generous. With that incredible compliment that he just shared, I learned from Brian. But to those of you that I don't know, I'm a senator out of New Mexico. My name's Ben Ray Luján. Grew up on a small farm out that way, little Division II school. I don't know that I fit the mold here in the Senate, but nonetheless, I'm here now, so they have to deal with me. But it's an honor to be with each and every one of you. So thanks again. Miguel, Miguel, want to say thank you so much for reaching out here and for posing this question. Looking at the proposed budget, which includes significant cuts to NASA's science program, nearly 47%, according to the Planetary Society's analysis. Now, as you have here clearly, these cuts threaten the continuation of many active missions and could severely impact science and innovation across the country. Now, the question is this: what are you doing to prevent these cuts and protect NASA's science and research funding, which benefits not only the national progress, but also jobs and education in many states? And look, Miguel, you're absolutely correct here in looking at the negative impact to students across the country, research, science, all of the incredible work that's taking place, and that the leader of space exploration, in this case, the United States of America, we've always been in this incredible place. But it's not just a matter of going and traveling to space. It's the science, it's the work, it's the understanding. Now, I could never answer this question like someone, like a colleague of ours, Mark Kelly, who's a United States Senator out of Arizona. As you know, one of the few astronauts who has served in the United States Senate as well. But he and his twin brother served in this space doing incredible scientific missions and things of that nature. But in the end, the negative impact to what this means to just basic science in our school system is something that we should be fighting against and making sure that our colleagues are not ripping money apart. Every step of the process of what our House Republican and Senate Republican colleagues have been doing in this space when they offer a piece of legislation that they didn't even take a close look at. And look, a bit of a tangent here, but the proof point is, look at what Marjorie Taylor Greene recently said over the weekend. She said that there was a provision that was left out of this thing, a provision that was in this around AI that was going to strip away rules at the local level. And she admittedly said she didn't know it was in there. And if it was still in the bill when it comes across, she's going to vote against it. Well, how many of my colleagues understand that they're going after these basic, simple science programs that are going to hurt us across the country? I, like Brian Schatz and Cory Booker and all of my Democratic colleagues, we're doing everything we can right now to slow this down, to call out the nonsense, to call BS everywhere that it exists, and force votes to save these programs. So this is something that we'll continue to work on together. But thanks for reaching out. Thanks for what you said. Katie, thank you so much. Katie from Instagram is asking, quote, will the food distribution program on Indian reservations be impacted because of this bill? Katie, the answer is yes. This is going to destroy the access to food across all of America, but especially on sovereign nations. Think about the importance of school food programs, lunch programs when you're a student, you're going to school, or Meals on Wheels programs. Think of all of our constituents, our grandmas who may not be able to leave home and they depend on someone with the Meals on Wheels program to deliver that food. That's all in jeopardy. My Republican colleagues thought that they should strip away about $250 billion from the food programs. Well, the bill actually takes away more than $300 billion. It also jeopardizes all of those small grocery stores that we have on so many of our Indian reservations. About 10% of the revenue that goes to grocery stores actually comes from these important nutrition programs. I had a hearing on this today where my Democratic colleagues were there. Senator Booker was there. We had constituents from different parts of the country testify today, but this is one of those areas of concerns that we all have. I'm honored to represent 23 nations in New Mexico. I work with Senator Schatz, who's the highest ranking Democrat on the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs as well. I am terrified as to what this means to just people, friends and neighbors, Native American constituents that live on reservations, if they're going to get that meal, if students are going to get a meal, or if they're going to go to bed hungry. And look, Senator Raphael Warnock, he talked about it this way today. Not only are my Republican colleagues taking away these nutrition programs from working families, they're going to leave kids by taking food out of their plate, if you will, and they're going to stick them with the tab, because all of this just adds to the debt and the deficit as well. It is nonsense what's happening in this space. Such an important question. Thank you so much, Katie. Ted from Instagram, Ted asks, do you think the Republicans are going to bypass the parliamentarian? You know, Ted, I hope they don't, but they proved a week ago that they were willing to tear apart the fabric of these essential rules that exist just to be able to move legislation. Rather than having an up or down vote and letting colleagues show you where they stand, they're using these ridiculous rules, making things up as they go, and doing things that some folks just describe as nuclear, blowing up all of the rules on the Senate floor. And so to this piece of legislation, which is going to add, I don't know, $5 to $7 trillion to our debt. That's the cost of this thing. It's going to take away programs from working families, like nutrition programs. It's going to arguably close rural health clinics, maybe even rural grocery stores, because the revenue's not there. In addition to all of the other nonsense, it's not fiscally responsible at all. And they're going to use gimmicks to try to get it across the finish line. Remember, the House Republicans had a vote at 1 a.m. in a rules committee, like 6 a.m, 7 a.m on the floor, and they did it in the dark of night. I don't know what they're trying to hide, but because of the tactics they're using, it shows you the concern that exists. It's real. Thanks for this important question. Kate, thanks for asking this question from Facebook. You're asking, is there anything else we can do to protect our public lands? We had a small save recently, but the threats and challenges are very much still there. So, Kate, I would say kudos to Martin Heinrich, my colleague from New Mexico, and Gabe Vasquez, United States representative out of New Mexico. They were the leaders on a piece of legislation that did exactly what you described here with the small save recently. But I would argue that the threats and challenges are very much still there. What my Republican colleagues are proposing, as you know, they're saying the United States should sell all of our public lands. Think about Yellowstone and all of these important places that we protect in the United States. And what my Republican colleagues are saying, sell it all. Take that money, give tax breaks to folks that are making millions of bucks a year and more, and to heck with everyone else. That's the nonsense that's there. I'm very concerned about it. But what you can do, and we can all do, is use our voice, stand up, make sure you're showing up to these town halls. Well, I guess it's Democratic colleagues having town halls, so a few of our Republican colleagues are willing to go before constituents and voters. But if they do show up, be able to talk about this issue, let's stand up and protect our public lands and our way of life. And I'll close with this on that one. My grandfather, Don Luján, he always told me, leave things better than you found them. I mean, why can't we just all work that way when it comes to our lands? And by the way, being able to breathe clean air, drink clean water, those are all things that we should be willing to fight for and stand up for together. So thanks for the question. Emma's asking from Instagram, what happens if the education department closes, and what happens to special needs students? Emma, such an important question. I would add, it's not just the closure of the Department of Education that would hurt special needs students. Think about programs in Medicaid, nutrition programs, stable support systems for all of these families across the country that will also hurt special needs families. But many of the rules that were put in place when the Department of Education was established was because of the treatment of people. In this case, people that had special needs, friends and neighbors, constituents that were being mistreated. Think about civil rights. I mean, think about what it means to be able to protect access to education. That's why the Department of Education came into existence. And it's why we see so many of my Republican colleagues just going after these programs as well. There's no secret here. It's blatant. It's right in front of us. It's nonsense. And so I'm very concerned what would happen to all of my constituents, family members who have special needs that are attending school today if the United States Department of Education closes. And by the way, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, he actually tried to do this with an executive order. Fortunately, the courts told him you couldn't do it, but they've not stopped there. And they're still trying to do everything they can to dismantle it. Big concern. Such an important question. Thanks for asking it. Josh, thank you so much for reaching out to, man. Josh from Facebook said, quote, "I'm concerned how this bill will affect family farmers. What should we know and speak out against on this?" Josh, I don't know where to begin, man, but this is such an important question. So I'm one of the United States senators that grew up on a small farm. I still live on a small farm. Now, our farm was self-sustenance. It was the gardens that we had. We shared it with my neighbors who were my aunts and my uncles. The family took care of the garden. We raised chili like we all do in New Mexico, tomatoes, cucumbers, lettuce, onions, garlic, staples, a few fruit trees out there with apricots, cherries, and apples as well. We raised sheep. We had chickens. My brother had a horse. He claimed that he rode that horse. I don't think he did when he was young, but he's pretty good now that he's older. And we even had a few cows on that, but it was for the families. We grew up with not much money in the bank, but we always had a meal. We didn't know we were poor growing up because we always had something to eat. This piece of legislation, though, hurts farmers in so many ways. Number one, you already know that farmers are getting hurt across the country because of President Trump's national sales tax, right? These things that he calls a tariff. Food input costs are going through the roof. It's making it harder and harder. Now, the other area that farmers are getting hit is because Republicans chose to go after these nutrition programs. So think about all the food banks across the country, schools where local farmers were able to sell their local produce to the schools to serve with school lunches, things of that nature. All of that is being devastated. In addition to that, $300 million grab at this program puts the concern that I shared earlier about closing rural grocery stores in jeopardy. That's real. When all that adds up, it points directly to these small farmers. In addition to that, if times get tough and something goes wrong with the budget or the crop goes south and you need to get health care and it might be Medicaid that you depend on, well, what happens if that goes away? What happens if we get into tough times, like life happens to every one of us, and all of a sudden you need to go to that food bank, or you have a child who is going to be going to school and is going to depend on that school program for lunch as well. That goes away. All that adds up, and I would argue it points right back to small farmers across the country. We should be very concerned about this, and every small farmer across the country that's getting hit with those tariffs or had a contract pulled because you were working with a food bank or a local school, show up and use your voice and show exactly how it's hurting you, show exactly how it's hurting the family, how it's hurting the local economy. Use your voice and speak up. And by the way, if you are a farmer, thanks for being out there and putting in that hard work. I know it's not easy, but we appreciate you. Thanks for what you do. Kim from Instagram. Kim says, can you talk about what kinds of things Congress can deploy if Trump keeps on defying the courts? Well, look, in this particular area, the courts are one of the areas in the short term that we can stand up to this president. And we've already seen court decision after court decision tell Donald Trump, you can't do what you're doing with these executive orders or going after these programs, things of that nature. The courts are going to matter. Now, the question is, what happens next if Donald Trump continues to go against the courts and ignore the courts? Well, we need the Supreme Court to stand strong and hold him accountable. We also need to work with our colleagues from across the country in the House and in the Senate and say, look, we have checks and balances in America. Don't take my word for it. Look at the United States Constitution. Look at what our founders had and what we should be following in the United States. And if you're not going to speak up and stand up to any president that's going to ignore the courts and ignore the three branches of government, we've got to do something strong here. So using our voices, showing up, standing up, continuing to engage in these courts. Recently, I've personally filed some amicus briefs into some of these court cases, not only before other federal courts, but before the United States Supreme Court as well. We all have a role here. We all have a responsibility, and there's more that we can all do. Any other questions? Josie from Instagram. Can you tell us what will actually happen from exploding the deficit to pay for these tax cuts? How will a larger deficit affect me and my family? Well, Josie, things get more expensive. What happens when all of that debt gets passed on, or the full faith and credit of the United States gets downgraded or put in jeopardy? Well, credit card interest rates go up, car interest rates go up, mortgage interest rates go up. In addition to what Donald Trump is already doing with his national sales tax and these tariffs, we already see the cost of goods going up, the cost of phones going up, the cost of everything that you use, diapers, strollers for babies, for little kids, going up. And I mean, the kicker here is that my Republican colleagues keep saying that they're doing all of this stuff, all of this devastation to programs like Medicaid or nutrition programs for working families, because it's fiscally responsible. Well, how is it fiscally responsible when you're devastating these programs, you're making things more expensive for everyday working families across America, you're going to give away tax breaks to people making millions of bucks a year? And look, people that are doing well, I want them to do well. I want them to continue to grow wealth. I'm just saying they don't need a tax break. Let's put the tax breaks to working families, to folks that are making less than millions of dollars a year. That's where the money should go. But in the same way that my colleague from Georgia said that Republicans, by going after these nutrition programs, are taking foods out of the mouths of kids, they're going to stick them with the tap. So now all of this future debt, these annual deficits, all of that it gets passed on to someone, and things get more expensive. So, we need to call out a lie when it's a lie. This is a lie. And like my grandfather would tell me growing up, the cover-up is worse than the lie. My Republican colleagues have been lying to the American people by saying they were not going to touch Medicaid, they weren't going to cut Medicare, they were not going to go after nutrition programs, and they were not going to add to the debt. They lied about all of it. It is happening. Sean, you ask an important question here that's connected to the last one. How much will this add to the deficit? Is it true it's like $2 trillion? Well, look, the Congressional Budget Office has been coming up with scores as they've been looking at these changing pieces of legislation. It's at least $2 trillion that will be added. The cost of this bill is being measured between $4 and up towards $7 trillion, depending on who you talk to. And the numbers that I've been using recently are the analysis that have come out of the Wharton School. And the reason I've been using that is because that's where President Donald Trump went to school. So I figured, well, if he went to school there, let's use the numbers that they've come up with. So a cost of about $5 trillion. It's not all paid for. And by the way, here's one of the things to watch. A gimmick that was used by Senate Republicans, I don't know, maybe a month ago, when they were looking at the cost of the House bill, which was scored between, like I said, $4 and $7 trillion at the time, adding at least $2 trillion to the debt. My Republican colleagues had the audacity to say, well, they're going to come up with something called baseline policy. And it doesn't cost anything anymore because it's existing policy. Well, the Congressional Budget Office came out a couple of weeks later and said, no, this is costing trillions of dollars. Again, the cover-up is worse than the lie. This is such an important question. And watch Senate Republicans as they try to tell the American people these bills don't cost any money. All they're doing is lying to them. Hey, Robin, thanks for putting this on there from Facebook. Robin is saying, sorry for the simple question. There's no such thing as a simple question. They're all important questions as well. But you said, but can you explain what a reconciliation bill is and how long will it affect us if passed? So look, reconciliation bills are gimmicks, if you will, tools that are used to bypass all the voting thresholds and all the rest to be able to move a piece of legislation to the President of the United States. That's all that it is. It's a fancy title. This just allows pieces of legislation to move through the United States Senate without requiring a 60-vote threshold. The negative impacts, though, if Republicans push through this bill, that will be the largest elimination of nutrition programs in America, the largest elimination of access to healthcare when it comes to Medicaid programs across the country, which will close rural health clinics, the elimination of those nutrition programs, which will close rural grocery stores, and then all of the other bad things that are in this package. I don't know if I will see this get fixed in a lifetime. It'll be devastating what they do, because think about it this way. If mental health programs that are dependent on Medicaid get destroyed. Think of all the mental health providers across the country that are going to lose their jobs, get fired, or move on. So they'll go away. Well, if a patient has a relationship with the mental health provider, it's built on trust of working together. Well, what happens if that goes away? How long is it going to take for that patient to have a trustworthy relationship with someone to get care from again? I think it's endless. I'm very worried about what this means to all these programs across the country, but it's such an important question. And I just want to thank you all for giving me a chance to visit with you. I've had the honor of serving with several colleagues throughout the United States. And I'm one of the more junior members. I recently joined the Senate in 2021. But there's a lot of incredible leaders, young leaders, leaders that care about people, that are compassionate, that are doers, that stand by their word, care about constituents, and get things going. And you're going to hear from one next. And that's one of the newest members to our body, but she's not new to America. She's not new to the people of Maryland. And that's Angela Alsobrooks. Angela, come on over. We'll turn the floor over to you. Yeah. Thanks for having me, everyone.